Geoff, finally, it's all yours.
Excellent, thank you. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. I think that's really cool to be talking to all of you here. I also want to first open up by sharing my appreciation to Randy, my friend in the back of the room, to Mike, for inviting me to participate, right? A couple of things. One is we're going to talk almost exclusively not about boats. So if you're familiar with the term comic relief, we're going to call this maybe maritime relief. I don't know. We're going to, there'll be a mention, but secondly, a lot of the material that you're going to see in here is stuff that you all already know. The reason that I'm putting on this presentation is maybe in part as a reminder, or maybe you pick up one or two things out of the discussion. It's going to seem very simple and obvious stuff, but I think it's stuff we forget. I think it's stuff maybe we could be reminded of, or maybe you pick up a tidbit or two. So I'm Geoff Grainger. I've been a SAM surveyor since 2010. I am a member as well. I am in the Great Lakes region, so I reside near Green Bay, Wisconsin. Go Packers.
Did they win this year?
They got far closer than anybody thought they would. So, just to give you a sense.
In other words, no, Lloyd.
All you saltwater people, you know, it's a little bit different world for us, but quick and relevant CV. So again, I mentioned surveyor since 2010, but with regard to some of the stuff I'm talking about, so I was a diagnostic tool design and support engineer for Harley-Davidson Motor Company from 2003 to 2007. The diagnostic tool that we use for the Mercruiser and Mercury is our tool. So basically the stuff that we designed is the same exact, or was the same exact thing as Mercury ultimately developed for their diagnostic tool. So I sort of have a distant understanding of quite a bit of that stuff that we're talking about. In a previous life, I was also a true computer geek. So I went through a lot of the credentialing and certification process. That's what brought me to Harley-Davidson. So worth the time, but Harley-Davidson was at that time a fantastic company to work for. And when I discovered that I just could no longer work for corporations, then comes self-employment. So that's why I'm here. Prior to that, software sales engineer, I was also a senior litigation paralegal in another previous life. And now I am a entrepreneurial addict, perhaps. I've accounted for 4 businesses here. I just recently started a 5th. So that is, seems to be a little bit of an addiction, which is also why I get very little sleep. I'm just going to hang this out here for the moment. What is a marine surveyor? Wasn't that long ago that I was asking that question, and marine surveyors in the room, how often have you named your job title and had people ask, would you map the bottom of the ocean or what? Yeah. Right? So I always thought not the greatest term for the profession. We're going to talk about building business basics, and building business generally, but we're going to start off with some basics. And again, this is stuff that you guys all already know by and large, but if you can pick up something out of it, then I've done my job here today. And you know, a lot of us have talked recently about some of the soft skills that we just don't learn in the process of becoming a marine surveyor, or sometimes in the professions leading up to being a marine surveyor. Prior mechanics in the room, prior fiberglass guys in the room. Yeah, so, you know, those aren't necessarily, and I presume also that you worked for a different company when you were doing that, yes? So that wasn't, some of this stuff wasn't part of your job. We're all sitting here with our phones, our computers, our tablets. Obviously, a website is kind of a foregone conclusion now. It's probably a starting point. It's, with all of my businesses, it's one of the very first things that I've done. Along with that, some basic, everybody know what SEO is? We love to throw acronyms around, computer geeks. Yeah, no.
Absolutely.
Search engine optimization. Yeah. But before we get deeper into that, going old school, business cards, that's usually the second thing that I'm doing. You know, having that business card, introducing, shaking a hand, handing it off, there's obviously still significant value to that. We don't just touch phones, but I'm sure that's coming at some point. For now, you got to have business cards, right? Hustle. So I developed as part of the presentation. What did I do when I first started becoming a marine surveyor? I mapped out my area. I broke it up into segments. And basically I went it out with my website and my business cards in hand, and I started introducing myself. I visited the brokers, visited the repair yards, I visited the boat builders, the naval architects and engineers, insurance agents, and even some banks writing if they did a lot of boat loans. Show of hands of anybody that has done that. And I'm talking about like dedicated, gone out and introduced yourself in the process. Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
You didn't take a bag of donuts with you?
I didn't do that on the first pass. That was second and third pass in
Yes,
some
it's
cases.
good tactic.
Try to
You
get
get money back
expenses
first.
down.
You had to get some money
That's
back
exactly
first.
right. In my case, it immediately earned me business because there was a number of brokers and yards that told me they had never had a marine surveyor come in and do that before. So in one particular case, there was a broker who, we butted heads all the time, but he continued to give me business because I'd earned that immediate respect because I went out and introduced myself, delivered business cards. So associating professionally, everybody's at least a member of ABYC. Yeah. NFPA, so certification training, being in rooms like these, going through these processes is networking opportunities. IAME members. Yeah, 4, excellent. You all familiar with IAME, International Association of Marine Investigators? Yeah, great outfit, especially if you're interested in doing damage claims work. If there's anybody that isn't familiar with that, I should say it's a conglomeration of insurance companies, marine surveyors, and law enforcement. And then this trident of individuals comes together for a training every year, somewhere in the United States.
Lexington next year.
Lexington next year. So generally centrally, they're always considered to that. So people can get everywhere, at least within the United States, outside the United States. It also is based on who's willing to host. We're usually in that instance hosted by a particular law enforcement agency that wants to be a part of or attend or learn from that. So attend events and training as often as possible. Who's making a paycheck in here right now? You're making a paycheck in here right now.
Yeah. I got money in the bank being wired today. How's that not making money?
Are you? Is your check in my car? I guess.
Cash is in my car.
Cash.
King of the day.
You're just gonna interrupt everybody's point by just undermining, aren't you?
No, you just asked a question.
Yeah.
So don't ask-
No, I shouldn't.
So don't ask him any questions.
Right.
Or no answer.
We're all here. We've had an expenditure, obviously, to get here. We're taking time out of the field. One of the challenging aspects, of course, of our profession is the fact that we rely entirely on our time and availability, in addition to our expertise, to be able to make money. Obviously, attending events is an expense. From a purely financial standpoint, the reason that we make this choice and investment in terms of how much we spent to get here is because we become better at our professions. But as well, you know, every single time I do one of these, it costs me additional money because I see a new toy that I want. But I also get an opportunity to talk to people whose names I may know and don't get to see very often. Randy, who I never got the chance to meet, but we've been talking for quite some time. Brings people from other countries, and I'll get to how, you know, some of the value in that, in terms of networking. It's just a great opportunity. Boat pokers. Everybody familiar with boat pokers? Yeah. So I've actually had surveyors tell me that they will not refer somebody who's not a boat poker. So that's not just a punch because I happen to be the person who runs and owns boat pokers, but they've legitimately told me that beforehand. So it's a fantastic resource. We'll get into a little detail
About
about.
too much, verbiage, doesn't it?
Pardon?
I was a member of Coke a long time ago, it was just too much back and forth, it was just too much email to look at every day, don't have time for it.
I'll tell my story with that too. So associate socially. So be a resource and a presenter. Presenting at your local yacht club. I did we have a freshwater issue, electric shock drowning with leaking AC currents into the grounding system, especially with household appliances, things like that that are installed in boats. You see the little signs at the marina that say, no swimming, and, we all have a little rebellious streak. We think to ourselves, you can't tell me I can't go swimming. There's a reason for that. So I presented for the Port Washington, forgive me, the Marina Association. And within about 48 hours, they had signs out saying no swimming for risk of electrocution. So being a resource to your community, you never know how far that's going to reach. Was somebody potentially going to swim? I knew people swam in it. I'd seen it. Was there a real risk of or likelihood of somebody getting hurt or killed? We'll never know, hopefully. So Power Squadron, boat owners groups, if you're a Sea Ray owner or no matter what type of boat you have, you associate with some of those groups. Those are a means to get your name out among your community, and in particular, something well. If you're one of those ragbaggers or whistle pissers, sailing clubs are a fantastic resource to join. But always have your business cards on you, because that's the most simple and convenient way.
We've got a guy in England who approached a radio station and said, I will do a 2-hour slot once a month for you, a Q&A on boats. And he's been running for 3 or 4 years, very successful. And he's extremely he's busy surveyor.
So he is, so he got a show out of doing it. Was it sort of an
Basically, yeah, I mean, radio stations are looking for content, okay?
Yeah.
And it costs them money sometimes to produce content.
Yeah.
This guy pitches up for 2 hours once a month. Easy for the station.
Brilliant.
Really, really. And it's worth, you'd be amazed how many local radio stations will say,
Would take
yes,
you up on
please.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it never crossed my mind to do that. I guess you always think of the radio shows as,
Yeah.
well, from the standpoint of being willing to pay you. So I imagine you probably, maybe by now it's got so popular, you get some.
Don't know the answer to that, but it's good.
The pay is having your name out there. Everybody's hearing it. That's brilliant. Building a reputation. This is sort of come up in bits and pieces along the lines, because we've been talking damage claims and some other things. Obvious, not obvious, talking about first impressions. I don't know that I trust a marine surveyor showing up in a suit and tie, because he's probably not wanting to get dirty. By the same token, though, you want to have at least a, reasonably professional, appearance when you're going into a situation. Frank and I were talking about that a little bit later, or earlier, I should say. Lombardi time. If you're not 15 minutes early, you're late. So, my wife, Angelica, who's joined me, was interested in seeing what I do for a living, a little closer, knows that when we're running late, the anxiety level goes through the roof. I'm pacing and walking around and chewing on my fingernails and looking at her and going, are you ready? Are you ready? Study. If you're running late, call. I get laughed at all the time. My GPS says I'm going to be 2 or 3 minutes late. I will call and say, hey, I'm running late, because again, my 15 minutes scenario. And they said, what are you talking about? When are you going to be here? They're expecting a half hour. I said, no, probably, about 5 minutes. No, you can just hear them rolling their eyes on the phone. But it makes an impression. They remember that you were considerate enough, even though you're running late. You're not leaving them, because that 2 minutes can be long if they're standing at the dock waiting for you. If they're sitting at their computer and they're working, they don't care. But if they're standing at the dock waiting for you, that 2 minutes all of a sudden becomes annoying, right?
For me, it's a whole different situation.
Different culture, right?
It's absolutely.
Yeah.
If you have an appointment with Guatemala at 3 o'clock, don't expect him to arrive before 3:30.
All that Colombian time sometimes,
But then I got the gringos
You're on time.
that expect you to be on time.
Yeah. it is a distinct cultural difference. There's
Oh,
no
yeah.
question about it.
Yeah,
Or even regionally. I mean, we call it island time in Door County. So for those of you that don't know, the state of Wisconsin, the thumb is Door County. It's a more laid back type lifestyle there. We just refer to that as island time. It's not distinctly different.
what it should be.
I say this every presentation, almost every conversation I have. Voice of the boat, objective voice of the boat. And that's come up here today and yesterday, just practicing ethically. There's a lot of influences on you. You know, my first broker that was giving me all this business, you know, I was concerned about how my findings were going to affect my opportunity to get additional votes. It's in your head, you think about it, they're asking you questions about information that doesn't belong to them. You have to stand firm with that and, you know, keep it to yourself. That information belongs to my client. And most importantly, of course, is when you're going through that vote, be thorough and accurate as you can be. One of the most common complaints from just about anybody who's ever read a surveyor is, well, I don't like your wording. The conversation, the diplomacy skills, these soft skills that, you know, we've kind of talked about a little bit. They are skills, and, you know, I refer to marine surveying as a practice or a trade because, again, you don't come out of Chapman or Atlantic School of Surveying or the UK version of that and immediately know how to go into this and have, you know, all of that experience.
Every finding that I have in a report has an associated photo.
Yes. And good report presentation. Oh, I don't know about IMS, but Sam's, now every meeting has a report presentation discussion. Varying aspects of it, but 14 years, it's brutal to go through that. But at the same time, every time I walk away with it and go, yeah, this is maybe something I could do or should do to improve my report. And a lot of that's content related, but, you know, even having a good report presentation or something that looks good. I've gone back to boats and seen my surveys in a little plastic binder stuck in a drawer somewhere. I don't mail them. I don't send them out in plastic binders, but, you know, they appreciated having that detail, thought it looked nice. Put it in here if I ever need to go back and reference this, I've got it. And it, no, they want to even improve upon it. I think that says something.
So to answer your question, we do run a quarterly report writing course.
Mhm.
I think I perhaps mentioned yesterday. It's 3 hours. It is a bit like going back to school because we are talking about the use of language. Flabby phrases. Have anybody ever heard of the term flabby phrases? If you went through your reports or any piece of writing and looked at the words you use. So if I said to you he was completely surrounded, you don't need the word completely because surrounded means you're completely surrounded. It's a really simple example. And you would be amazed how much shorter your reports would come if you practice that. We used to call it précis at school. You remember précis at school? You were given something that was 1,000 words and told to make it 300 words without losing the meaning of the story. It's really interesting. It's quite hard to do actually, but the little things like that, you know.
I would say every report I write that I run into that because anybody who knows me knows I'm a talker. I can just get going and going and going. Lloyd and I get on the phone, it's rarely 5 minutes. Number of other surveyors as well. And I tend to, that bleeds into my reports a little bit. It's probably taken me 14 years, you know, severe corrosion or heavily corroded.
Yes.
You know, in many cases, it's corroded as corroded. I mean, even Jerry Schmidt, who was my instructor back at Chapman, you know, he said, you don't need to put that in there. It's corroded.
Yeah.
Report that it's corroded and what to do about it. You know, you're not giving it any value by adding that. It becomes potentially inflammatory in some cases. Yes, thank you. Millennials. Hustle is really becoming a lost art. You just don't see it, I mean, almost anywhere. And for us older generations, it's painful. You know, whether you're talking about basic customer service in a restaurant or a coffee shop, whether you're talking about the people you're on the phone with at Verizon or AT&T, you know, there's hustle in every aspect of doing a job, and it's becoming a lost art. So the reason I bring that up is because it can be a real easy way to stand out, especially for younger surveyors coming into this, because you will separate yourself from your generation, which, you know, I don't think I'm telling any secrets to say that the respect level is always in question. Specialize and develop your practice. Is everybody taken a USPAP, or I don't know if there's a European, if they use USPAP or similar?
No, I don't know what USPAP is.
Okay, yeah.
So I don't think we do.
Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice was put out by the Association of Appraisers as a sort of entry-level guidance to the practice of doing appraisals. And I'm certain they're probably not the only one that does that. It's probably more of a US based thing because I think the association might be strictly US based. Not that this necessarily is a development from the standpoint of a specialty as some of these items are, but because of the fact that, you wouldn't, I guess what I would say about USPAP is I don't think I would ever want to be before the person in the black robe without having to defend the appraisal that I've done. We're always protected by the fact that it is our opinion as professional marine surveyors to a certain point, right?
So Ronald's just popped up to say it does not make you an appraiser. USPAP does not make you an appraiser.
That's correct.
That's
So
correct,
that's a great clarification.
Yeah.
So if you really wanted to pursue getting a credential as a surveyor, an appraiser, through the ASA, there are additional classes and steps. Like I said, this is kind of the entry level, 101 type class. It's 1.5 days. I think it's a 12-hour course, might be 2 days. It's been quite a while since I took it. They do have recertification processes as well. After a certain period of time, not something I've done. I did the first one. I got the gist of it. And I kind of consider myself an appraisal geek, and that's a topic I can get off into a lot of detail as well, just in my own practice and I guess, deliberation. So, engine surveys, guys who were mechanics prior, you know, they've got that specialty background. One of the most difficult things for me to find on surveys is somebody who is, you know, truly an engine surveyor. And even the engine mechanics in a lot of the shops don't like to leave the shop. You know, once they get out, it's an expense for that shop or it's an expense to them. Plus, you know, they're still making their hour. They don't want them out because that's productivity time that they're losing. But, you know, it's an area where if you've got the background and discipline to continue through that, it's a great alternative to just doing straight pre-purchase, another revenue stream. I love doing damage claims. That's my favorite aspect of the business. I love the investigative aspects of it, the sleuthing, the interpretation, the entertainment that comes along with getting this fantastic story for a really simple problem. It's great, great fodder for sure. Commercial and cargo obviously has some geographical challenges, you know, particularly for, you know, basically depending on where you are, there's more or less there. I probably do about 7 or 8 cargo damage claims per year. Maybe a little bit more than that. I've investigated butter, the condition of butter after a fire. I've done 2 airplanes. I've done a poop processing plant for a city who was shipping their stuff over to the East Coast for processing, and they wanted to do it locally because of the incredible expense that was associated with it. So if you get into doing commercial and cargo, it's a very interesting field. You just need to recognize, you know, what your limitations are and make sure that you're presenting those. A lot of times, commercial or cargo investigations, for example, the insurance company is looking for somebody to go out there and basically be a reporter and who can understand the process of investigating a claim. I did not need to become a butter expert. I did not need to become a aviation engineer to go out and do these. Basically, I was going out, taking pictures and being the data collector. But you need to make sure that your insurance company understands those types of things up front.
We've certainly hit Ronald's button. He's come up with a bit more for us.
Uh-huh.
There are some surveyors who use the USPAP logo and call themselves an appraiser. In Ronald's view, that's unethical. And he says, when you call yourself an appraiser without being a certified appraiser, you leave yourself wide open to liability.
It's an interesting point.
Thanks, Ronald.
Splitting, so I'd like to think about that a little bit. I don't represent myself necessarily as an appraiser, but I will provide what I refer to as appraisal reports. That could be crossing into that line that Ronald's talking about.
Yep.
I'd be interested in looking into that further. So, we are providing a fair market value. We're doing it based on a repeatable scientific method if you're USPAP. But at what point we're using those words, we're hashing those words again, right? Thank you for that, Ronald. I'm interested to dig into that a little deeper. If I'm going to call myself an appraisal geek, I guess I better. Finishes and coatings, this is one of the more interesting things, and maybe simultaneously least interesting things I've ever heard about as a specialty, but I understand there's a small number of marine surveyors who literally specialize in inspecting these multi-million-dollar finishes that are sometimes getting put on super yachts and commercial boats.
But they also determine value based on shine, depth of field, bad paint jobs and all those.
It's a whole specialty. It gets very, very deep. So it's not as simple as, wow, that looks great, you know, and walking away and putting in a report on it. When you're talking about putting that much paint and that much money into putting a finish on something, you know, they want to know that it was done right and that it will last, so they don't have to do it again soon. So wood boats, you know, personally, I'll do small wood boats, anything that has significant obstruction, but that's an area that a lot of people are getting out of. So it's becoming a high demand thing because people are trying to keep these things alive. And I try and do what I feel like I can do within my ability to protect myself. The challenge with bigger wood boats is you can't get at everything, so you can't see all the rock, right? That's my choice. Somebody who really wanted to get into or has background or experience in wood boats, you know, would really have a lot of opportunity there. X-ray technologies. One of my clients actually is a guy who develops X-ray technology for the government. And he's demonstrated some of his equipment. There's definitely applications for that. Just an example of a specialty. Learn another language. Said I was going to reference back to you. You know, I've had to become a Spanish student. I was beforehand, but my beautiful wife is from Colombia. And we're working on her English. Mine is, my Spanish has been a 3-year project that has been challenging, but there will be a time where I'm going to want to be sort of a snowbird. I'm not your typical snowbird. I would like to get out of Wisconsin from April 1st to about mid-May. And unless I have, you know, somebody that's invited me, generally Florida, you know, there's silly with surveyors. You know, unless you have a connection, for example, that might be able to keep you busy while you're down there and get out of the cold. You know, it's already flooded. So I reference that because being able to speak Spanish could potentially give you opportunities in other countries where surveys are needed. Even though the gringos own the boats, as John will tell you, you need to know the locals as well if you really want to work down there. So, develop your presence. So we're going to get into a little bit more of the website stuff, but develop your website to be personalized but simple. You know, I think probably one of the things that freak people out about when we start telling them that they need to change their website or should have a website for that matter is, okay, I don't want a bunch of bells and whistles. My philosophy on offering my service or our service is to have a simple digital brochure. The original founder of marinesurveyor.com back in the mid-90s basically built a template. You put everybody into it and it served for a very, very, very long time. We're only running into problems now where those websites just aren't supported by the search engines. So we don't necessarily need to have big investments like we're competing with Best Buy or competing with Google or competing with any of these organizations. Write articles. So the first thing I did after I built my website is I started writing articles. Not only is that valuable to anybody who reads them anywhere, but it's also a nice SEO trick because I started writing them as blogs and then I started interconnecting them. And before you knew it, within I think about maybe 2.5 years, if you search for a marine surveyor in Wisconsin, you've got Sam's and you've got Geoff Grainger, Seaworthy Marine Survey. Develop your profiles. So if you're an ABYC member, you know you already have a profile. A lot of people just leave them sit there. So what am I going to do with that? You have some resources through ABYC to link to your website, to link to articles, to link to things you like. With that, you can interconnect your digital presence, for lack of a better way to describe it. And those are all things that are going to help promote you because as much as we may not like it necessarily, the younger generations are all on their phones, all on their tablets, and that's where they're living. So that's how they research. Invest. It does take money. There's no question about it. It takes money to make money. I think we all know that because we all just spent, you know, varying amounts of money to be here.
As
to
a
learn your
rule of
jobs better.
thumb, Jeff, we say, my background's not marine surveying, as you know. We always used to say 5% of turnover invested a year should be in creating more money.
Yeah.
So 5% of turnover would be a good figure.
Yeah, and you know, honestly, from the perspective of a marine surveyor, we get off really cheap. I would probably not a person in this room in the last 3 years has really felt like they're short on business. But the guys who've been here and maybe have a few grays, remember some difficult times probably. 07, 08, for example, things got a little tight. You started having openings in your calendar and we don't get paid time off. We don't get, you know. One of the big things I'm hearing right now, I don't need a website. My phone's ringing off the hook. I understand that. If that continues, great, you know. You want to be prepared if the time comes that you're not in that situation. I know I've been there. You know, when you're meeting, this is a kind of overarching comment. You know, when you're meeting people or talking to people, regardless of where you're going, we really have a cool job. I mean, I'm sure everybody here has told somebody you're a marine surveyor, and they say, what is that? And then you describe it, and they say, oh, that's a really cool job. You know, I think we get caught up in the weeds and the minutia sometimes and don't realize what a cool job it is. And if you remember that and go into your job with a smile, that makes an impression. We really have, those of us who are doing well in marine survey are really fortunate because, you know, we're making our own schedules. We're busy, we work hard, we're learning something all the time. You never really get too terribly bored with it. It's really an interesting comment Mike made at the beginning of the presentation that he's been with this job 10 years. I'll take this as an offline conversation, but you noticed that I had some previous lives before. This is the first profession I would say in that just didn't eventually hit a wall and said, this isn't interesting to me anymore. You know, I'm going to move on. So generally my shelf life with that was like 4 to 5 years. So and I've been doing this 14 now and I'm nowhere resembling boring.
Kind of wish you'd done it earlier, huh?
Yeah,
Just like I did.
for sure. How am I on time? I just want to do it.
Oh, don't worry, it's no worry.
We're good?
Yeah, we've got plenty of time.
All right, I said I would come back to this. So what is a marine surveyor? This was a question I asked when the first insurance company came along and said, you're going to need a marine surveyor to buy the 1990 Baja Cruisers 250 Sportfish, right around 2004. As a marine surveyor now, I think that was pretty wise advice, but at the time I didn't really necessarily understand the why. Obviously, we have a lot more information and resources now in 2023 than we did in 2004. I remember quite distinctly that I went on to probably Yahoo at the time and typed in marine surveyor and tried to look for one near me. And there were probably 7, 8, 9 of them. I could not find one. None of them had websites. There was very little information about what a marine surveyor was. I know I spent a significant time. I found somebody that was 250 miles away, ultimately to look at it. The first guy I ended up talking to, who was quite possibly really good at the job, had no credentials, but he was in Marquette, Michigan. I don't mean to put you in that spot to understand what my geography is, but that was a significant distance away. And then I ended up bringing up somebody from Chicago, which again is kind of put me in the middle of those two locations, about 400 or 500 miles apart. Everybody gets calls from prior clients asking for a referral. You know, I found this boat over in Tennessee. You know, can you refer a surveyor to me? These opportunities are chances to get to know some of the surveyors, get a chance to talk to them. In fact, I would even say that I like these small groups like this because there is some more interaction. You get to know a little bit about marine surveyors through what they say, their comments, quite a bit of things, getting to sit and talk to them at the table. These are all ways to just get to know people a little bit better and how they do their practice. I always thought it was sort of, I'm kind of critical of SAMs with the IMEX because they call it a networking opportunity, but you're in a room with 150 people listening to a presentation, you know, up at the front of the room. How are you really going to interact with people? Personally, my social battery usually wears out by the time I've gone through a whole conference. I pretty much want to go back, get some room service, have some water, watch about 2 hours of TV, and
Eat some Italian.
eat some Italian. So Lloyd, myself, and a couple of other surveyors went out at the last IMAC, and it's uncommon for me to do that. I really had a good time, and it gives me every reason to continue to do that, but, you know, at the end of these things, sometimes I'm just ready to go back to the hotel room.
You had a good time, Jim. I
We
got
did have a
picture
good
to prove
time.
that.
That was a blast. Yeah. Well, you know, you didn't ever let anything get boring. That was a big part of it too. So if it got to get where it felt like, you know, the awkward silence hit, Lloyd's your man. I often get calls about specialties, houseboats, wood boats, engine surveys, these types of things. So we're talking about doing specialties before. But referring specialties becomes, you know, another aspect of this. We are limited, I'm going to get a little bit into what marinesurveyor.com is in a minute, but resources limited to SAM's, NAM's Global, and the IMS websites. They're limited in the information that they can provide you. There's a limitation on some of the credentials outside of their own independent credentials or own individual credentials, specialties, and service areas. So introducing marinesurveyor.com. My other business. So marinesurveyor.com launched in March 2023. And my vision for this is to be the directory for credentialed marine surveyors. Early on, again, I'm going to keep pointing at Mike, but he talked about, this was more of a private conversation, I think, but he mentioned that you can call yourself a surveyor, hang out a sign, get business cards and a phone number and go to work. The tone of the discussion was getting into, you know, whether or not the government should, you know, be involved in regulating. That would probably differ from that because I don't know that, at least in the US, the government's ever done anything but slow processes down and make them more expensive for the legitimate people. But that said, it is kind of a problem, right? I mean, everybody in their area has somebody who is more or less hung a sign, or somebody that I call like greens fee surveyors. Florida has a few of those. Guys that are just looking to maybe do one boat or two boats a week just so they have some money in their pocket. They don't care about getting better at the job. They don't care about going through the education. They're concerned about oversight. So the vision for this is to provide a resource for somebody looking for a marine surveyor where they can at least find somebody that has committed to an organization and the ethical practices and the educational requirements and educational resources for that matter to be a good marine surveyor. Beyond that, well, marinesurveyor.com, I've kind of, the way we built this is we kind of broke it into 3 columns. So a resource for boat owners and boat buyers, which is kind of basically what I've been talking about. But as well for insurance companies. So I've talked to insurance companies and said, well, one of the things I'm doing with marinesurveyor.com is I'm asking each individual surveyor, do you do damage claims? So when somebody searches on marinesurveyor.com for a surveyor, they can also pick a specialty. So the idea being you're looking for a wood boat surveyor, you're looking for a houseboat surveyor, or you're looking for a damage claim surveyor, you can find it. The insurance companies were head over heels on this. They couldn't, I was really surprised how much time they're representing that they put into trying to find a marine surveyor that does damage claims.
I'll be talking to you.
Okay. Everybody who's in this room who's SAMs or NAMs is already listed on there. IMS is coming soon. Okay. But it's also designated to be a resource for marine surveyors. So we'll get into some of the what's in the pipeline a little further down the road. But marinesurveyor.com is a web marketing company, generally speaking. So we do hosting, we do website construction, we offer featured listings. So if you visit marinesurveyor.com, you're going to see some highlighted listings. They include bio, they include pictures, whatever you want to include in that. I provide that for my clients who are hosts. It's also something I provide if somebody already has a hosting company, already has a website, but just wants to be highlighted. And a highlighted marine surveyor will come up higher in the search rankings. We have basic and advanced SEO stuff, professional email services, and of course, I mentioned already boat hookers. Just real quick history on marinesurveyor.com. So one of the advantages I have coming into this, I've had it now for 2 years. It was actually built back in the 1990s. By some miracle, it was still ranking number 2 or 3. And by and large, that's just because of the traffic that it got. So it already had top placement in the searches. In fact, one of the worst things I did for that was to, at the cost of about $30,000, overhaul it all. I dropped down to the bottom of page one and early top of page two for several months after that. So we've been in the process of trying to recover from that, but it's happening very quickly. I'm really starting to see a good volume of traffic come back to it. And ultimately, when I've had the opportunity to talk to all of the surveyors and get all their information updated, and people start to see the more advanced resources and tools that are on the website to find a marine surveyor, I'm wholly expecting, Sam's is my target. They generally come up number one in US searches. Advantage, the business is owned by a practicing marine surveyor. So the fact of the matter is it's just myself. Don't let that scare you. I'm not doing the technical work. And Jenny, who is absolutely brilliant, fantastic, wonderful person. And there's a couple people in this room that'll attest to that. So the flip side to that, and I love to say this, we do not have 24/7 support. When you call us or email us, we're operating on general business hours, but I think everybody's experienced the 24/7 support before. Wait on hold, level 1. Is your computer on? It is on, it's still not working? Okay, let me get you to level 2. Let me get you to level 3. My philosophy on this is if you're a practicing marine surveyor and you're having any sort of problem, call me, call Jenny, leave a message if we don't pick up, or email us. We may not get to it immediately, but we're going to turn it around as quickly as possible. And meanwhile, you get to go back to work instead of sitting at hold. Face-to-face meet. GoDaddy is not here with a booth. They don't care about you. My primary mission here is to be a supporter and a resource for marine surveyors. And I will say this on top of that. You're going to have my contact information. I've handed out everybody here a business card. The people online obviously will have some means of being able to get my contact information or simply look me up, marinesurveyor.com. Don't be afraid to send me a question. If you're I've had marine surveyors call me, I got this letter that my domain's about to expire. What is this about? They aren't clients of mine. They're just calling me as a resource. I explain generally that those are scams. Send me a copy of the letter. I'll take a peek at it and just make sure it's not legitimate. As marine surveyors, we've got enough to learn about, right? Adding this whole other level of technology and as fast as it's moving is a bit of a burden and distracting and sometimes can cause some panic. Just give me a call, send me an email. We're here to be a resource for you. If you ultimately become a client because of that, fantastic, thank you. If not, we're happy to help regardless. Likewise, a throat to choke. We're humans. I don't think we've made a mistake yet, but the day is coming. I did want to add to that. So this, I got to give credit where credit was due. Tom Benton, Don Robertson were fairly ahead of their times in grabbing a hold of this. They needed a means to, Tom actually sourced the domain. Don Robertson was the geek behind it that developed the website.
When you're a used car salesman or something like that,
What's that? Don Robertson? Yeah,
Yeah.
he sold boats, he sold cars.
cars, planes, whatever, he sold everything.
Yeah, he didn't, it turned out he didn't like to get out of his chair. He liked to be in front of his computer and sell things online, which was brilliant, but it's also a killer. So I've determined that I have to stay practicing marine surveying because no matter how successful I get with the marinesurveyor.com business, I don't want to suffer the same fate because getting stuck in front of that computer is not the fate that I want. So I think we're down to the last slide. So development pipeline. These are some of the hopes for the not too distant future for marinesurveyor.com. Ultimately, I would like to give you your individual profiles similar to ABYC where you can go in and adjust your own stuff. Selfish, I know. I don't want to have to necessarily take all the phone calls and all the emails to do the updates. We do not charge to update your website. So we offer an hour and a half of tech time. Technically, we offer an hour. I kind of had it with the hour and a half to do any updates or any of that type of stuff on your website. If it gets beyond that, it's a bigger project. We charge for it, but otherwise it's included in your hosting fee. And you do have to host somewhere anyway. So advertising, once we have all the surveyors in and we have all their information as accurate as we can possibly get it, we already are doing some advertising, from some marine oriented companies. But we'll start pursuing that in earnest when I can say that this product is ready to go and it's really shooting up, so. I put in here networking with insurance companies and other professionals. So I don't know that marine surveyor will per se ever get into a scenario where it's profiling these individuals, because unless AI can help me out with that, it's a pretty huge task, but it is a resource to do that with. Boatappraiser.com is one of the things I'm now going to need to rethink because of our friend. I own the domain because it came with the package, but a resource which could provide some general market data. I don't know if you've ever seen, I don't know if it's cars.com or which one of them will give you like this sort of speedometer. You'll say this is the median, this is kind of the first standard deviation off of that. You know, the majority of the cars are being sold in this range. This is the high, this is the low. I have something like that in mind. Ebooks, literature, education, CEUs. You know, again, until I started this and I started talking to IIMS, I didn't realize what a fantastic resource for these materials you guys have already built. And it's overwhelming to look at the possible, you know, depth and breadth of materials that's out there that I could put on this. And you guys have kind of done that. And I think it's brilliant. So I'm very eager for us to talk and see, you know, how we can help each other in that respect, because being able to provide this stuff for, like I said, all three stakeholders in this is only going to promote us as a profession. You know, it's going to be something that they look at and say, oh, I know what a marine surveyor is. They're the ones that write articles for, you know, for my boat or whatnot. And then hopefully with some of that authority and high position in Google and money coming in, I can negotiate, you know, insurance discounts. Discounts with sold boats for those of you who use it. I know that those haven't necessarily gone well previously, but ooh, I got Frank's attention to that one.
Yes.
I just,
I have a plan, and I'm just gonna say this. We doing our own scheme. You know what I mean? Because our own scheme, our own plan.
You talk about insurance? Or,
No, we'll talk about that later. I'm talking about sold boats.
okay,
Because,
okay.
you know, everybody, a lot of people in here are looking at $800 subscriptions to sold boats. And sold boats is getting out of control for the brokers themselves as well. But if we talked about this a few minutes ago, this is buttressing our conversation about us being so individualized all the time. If we were actually more organized and team approach on some things, we are surveying. We are the ones that are setting the market, the values on all these vessels. Why don't we have our own
Database of
sold boats? Like maybe we can do something where, hey, instead of spending the $800 a year on sold boats, why don't we get together and say, hey, if you could put 10 boats a year in or 20 boats a year in that you're valuing, we create our own database and then have all the surveyors paying, being held hostage by sold boats essentially.
Right.
So I mean, if every one of us is aggressive, that's $8,000 a year. Anyway, that's something to think about.
That's something I hadn't considered, and it's, you know, my first reaction to that is, of course, you know, ornery marine surveyors trying to get anything out of them is going to be difficult. I'm too busy to that. But to your point, there's definitely a change in tone coming on. I mean, the younger surveyors that are coming up who are more technically apt, that have more experience with this type of stuff, it could be much simplified. And again, I'm really just starting to touch on, I've got an AI class that I signed up for. I took the first hour and a half of it and simply ran out of time to continue. It's still sitting there waiting for me to finish, because I'm very interested in what AI might be able to do in terms of somebody who has to pay a very expensive computer geek to build websites and retype all this stuff, or else I'm doing it myself. You know, how AI might be able to help me automate some of that stuff. You know, I wrote a page for one of the marine surveyors because Jenny she's learning quite a bit about marine survey, but you know, she just doesn't have the background in it. So a lot of times when we're doing something, say, you know, a little more unique, she'll ask me to do the writing on it. In this particular case, the surveyor's Spanish speaking, so his English isn't real solid. So he needed somebody who could basically write something that, you know, that a gringo would understand and not go, am I in tech support here or what? And I played with AI a little bit, and it probably did 80% of the work. Gotta be careful with it, because I disagreed with some of the stuff that it put in there, but nonetheless, I mean, I think I probably spent 2 or 3 hours ending up on what probably would have been an 8 to 10 to 12 hour job writing that out, so. To your point, maybe there's some way that we can ultimately just send us your reports, we'll dump them in, and the AI will extract the appropriate information, redact the stuff that's inappropriate to share, and develop that. That's great. I think I covered it.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Guess I'll add to that to say with regard to your own marketing, again, just have some fun with it. This is the most expensive t-shirt I have ever bought. This is a $60 t-shirt because I am a teacher, I'm a student, I am a book flipper. Brain surveyor. All I did was hit the next arrow key, which I'm sure killed my presentation. So, thank you guys.
You probably don't know about me.
Yeah.
I was on the developer's team for that.
Okay, guys, we're gonna have a 10-minute tea break here, and then we'll be back with you shortly.
Group
So
over next
10 minute
door said
break.
he had cookies and stuff next door.